the Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R Radio Star, here for you for a little Wednesday Q&A, and I know you love it. Well, you got it, baby. So, and we're going to cover, I actually plan on covering a lot of ground in this one. And, boy, I found that I've had to save or kind of store up the tech questions. I'm getting almost no tech questions whatsoever. Everybody's asking philosophy or history or something like that, which is totally fine. And I recently did a poll. If you're a Sovereign Tech patron, you're able to take part in the poll of what kind of content that people liked. Now, the highest vote was for, do everything, talk about it all, the geek stuff, whatever. And obviously that's what I plan on doing generally. But after that, choosing all of the above, the most popular ones were anarchism, philosophy, and history, and tech was like it was the bottom rung. So it's whatever whatever the patrons desire, of course. Ultimately it comes down to what I want to talk about, I suppose. But so we're going to get into a little bit of tech here. It's actually the second part of a question I answered a little while ago. And then we're going to get into we'll probably get into some history and maybe even a spot of ethics. And last week, I didn't give out an album of the week, so I'm going to give you two albums this week, even though they're by the same person. But I'll save that for the end. So anyway, I know a lot of people are probably wondering, hey, Stallion, could you talk about Vault 7? And I mean, holy shit, my social media has been blowing up with people saying, can't wait to hear Sovereign Tech this week, talking about Vault 7 and everything. I will be talking about Vault 7 this coming week. The one thing I'm going to put out there, though, right now, is that you keep right on using Signal. I'm just going to give you a little preview. Look, I am so fucking skeptical of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Hell, I'm even skeptical of Snowden. Okay, but WikiLeaks in particular, as late, I'm skeptical of them. WikiLeaks in particular, I think they were spreading a lot of BS, honestly, on Twitter yesterday. Of course, I'm recording this on March 8th, 2017 HE. And on the 7th is when they did the release of Vault 7, the largest CIA release of cache documents from the CIA or whatever, cache of documents, I should say. And, like they were saying, oh yeah, the encryption's broken on all these different things. And look, and I'm just touching on this quickly. And I already said it long before anybody else in my social circles, brought any of this up. Yes. Android and iOS have very serious security problems, okay? Those are legitimate. However, the claims that WikiLeaks is making is that the encryption itself was broken on, say, Signal and some other things. Now, getting into the other apps, that's another story. But as far as the Signal protocol, the axolotl protocol, is not broken. And really, for WikiLeaks to hint at that, to make that suggestion, and they did, and they tried to state it as fact. I'm glad Open Whisper Systems gave them some pushback, because it's just not true. Signal's not broken. Is the OS broken? And does that mean that regardless of what Signal's encryption is, that it doesn't really matter? Okay, that's a wholly separate conversation. But to suggest that Signal was broken was an outright falsehood. So you keep on using Signal. We'll talk all about it this week. If I got to spend an hour covering all of these documents and everything that came out, because it's not just Signal, that came out. There's shit about the TVs. There's shit about Windows. There's tons of stuff. And I will, of course, have solutions for you. I won't just, moan and groan. Okay, I will have absolute solutions for you, the actionable ones that you can do right now, and those will be coming, this Saturday. So anyway, I just want you to know, yep, I'm on top of it. I'm reading through the stuff. There's no way I'm going to read every document, before Saturday. But as far as what we do know and what I have read, I will definitely be commenting on it. And it'll be. I'll probably end up titling this week's episode will be episode 216. I'll probably end up titling it Vault 7 Solutions. So keep a lookout for that. Okay. So yeah, wow. Now a lot of people, boy, I got a lot of response. Of course, episode 215 had the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on with me, and a lot of people, I released the new intros finally, the new segment intros, new interstitials, and boy, I mean, people really liked them. And I am so honored by that. I'm glad you enjoy them. Got a lot of plans, coming up for a lot of that shit, and definitely looking at having some good times with it all. So anyway, why don't we start getting into some of the questions here? And the first question, pretty much, there was a question about Bitcoin wallets, about maybe three Q&A episodes back. And well, it wasn't about Bitcoin wallets. It was about BitSquare and just talking about like kind of the Bitcoin arguments in general. Which, by the way, if memory serves, I think Bitcoin Core just implemented segregated witness, which I said I was totally fine with. I'm fine with SegWit, and it doesn't, SegWit can act, on its own. It doesn't have to be part and parcel with the Lightning Network and all that. It has its own advantages, which I talked about. And so that happened. So hey, rock and roll. No argument from me. On that being a thing. So anyway, the question that I missed, it was like one sentence in that whole question had to do with what did I think about various Bitcoin hardware wallets. And I get asked about this a lot. In fact, I have clients that ask me, hey, what's the best wallet solution for me to go with, etc. We've crowdsourced, or we'll say crowdsourced knowledge. I think there's another term for that. It's escaping me. But they asked around, other experts perhaps, or people that claim to be experts. What did they trust? What did they want to use, etc. And hardware wallets inevitably, come up. So I'm going to cover my thoughts on hardware wallets here briefly, and then we're going to get into a couple other questions. So, okay, hardware wallets in general. Now, there's a few out there. Some are a little more well-known than others. Some are just clones of others, right? Like there's Trezor. A lot of people know about Trezor. But then there's, what is it, B Wallet, which is just like a clone of Trezor because Trezor's, largely open source. There's Cool Wallet. I mean, there's a whole slew of these different hardware wallets. And then there's like these card wallets that various companies do, where it's just a little like metal card usually because they like to say that it's fireproof and all this shit, right? It's a little card that, well, I mean the flaws. Okay, so here's the thing: when you're talking about these cards, it's not really a hardware wallet in that it's a like BitStashers. BitStashers is one of them that does this. Okay. It's more like a paper wallet than it is something that has any like electronics to it, that's like a device. It's not really a device. It's just simply, like a little wallet card, just like a paper wallet, that'll have a QR code and whatever else on it. Now, the inherent dangers with these is that you don't, unlike paper wallets even, which we could talk for a minute about paper wallets here, but unlike, paper wallets are a thing that you make and, you print out a couple QR codes on it and then, one that you can send to and then one that you can take, you can withdraw from it. Paper wallets are an interesting idea. There's, you want to be really, really careful when you're doing paper wallets because, most printers are internet connected and can send data of what they printed out, to whoever's, say, looking for it. So there are inherent dangers with printers. And in fact, we talked about, was a couple weeks ago, I think it was, we talked about on Sovereign Tech during Internet of Targets, we talked about how, or I even played the audio where a printer, a localized printer could actually, without even being connected, to the internet, could, as long as somebody, updated the firmware on it and loaded, kind of custom firmware, or in this case malware, it could send out, AM band as an AM radio, audio signals, that speaks words. That if you had an AM radio, you could listen to. We talked about this. What was it? Freecast or something? Now I'm forgetting the name of the bug, or well, it's not really a bug, but I'm forgetting the name of the exploit. But anyway, that's no internet required, right? And so if somebody was really targeting you, even the most secure implementation of doing a paper wallet, where you're printing it out from like a live CD of Ubuntu or something, and you're making sure that the printer is actually not connected to the internet. It's direct connected to the computer that you're running the live distro off of. All of this. You're taking all the steps. You still have that problem where your printer could effectively, thanks to the wonders of IoT, could spread the word out. That of what you're doing. Maybe even it could spell out your private key or something, right? So paper wallets, you kind of have the problem of the printer being inherently insecure, right? Like, I mean, especially now, more so. And it really speaks to the fact that, with the paper wallet thing, it really speaks to the fact that if you're targeted, you're fucked. But you got to be targeted, right? And most people aren't targeted. And not only that, it's not that most people aren't just targeted, but like even all of that data, honestly, that can get collected, right? Like, okay, so say like with Vault 7, the CIA can collect everything. Yes, they can collect everything, but they can't store everything forever. They really can't. Okay, one need only look at the challenges. Where is it, in Utah, with like the NSA build? Where they're trying to store everything. And the hard drives are constantly lighting on fire because you just can't store everything. You just can't. Okay, so yes, everything can be collected, and if you're targeted, like I said, you're absolutely screwed. That's not new for Sovereign Tech listeners. Okay, I've always said that if you're, no matter what steps you take, I don't care what the fuck you're using, if you are targeted by an alphabet soup organization or a particularly determined and skillful, cracker, malicious actor, bad actor, you're done. You're screwed. But you got to be targeted, and that's. But there's ways to mitigate being targeted. So anyway, so paper wallets, yeah, there's dangers there. Now, one could say that, well, these like machined, these aluminum kind of, wallets, maybe they'd be a little more secure. Well, of course, they're using probably some kind of CAD software, to make them, to kind of the 3D model, the QR code. So still the private keys are being stored somewhere, and again, I get it, it's like a paper wallet, but understand that you're not the one. In this case, here's the real problem, because you're saying, well, okay, I might not be able to print securely, but maybe somebody else can. Here's the thing. If somebody else is doing it, they could potentially hold on to your private keys, and say weeks or months or whatever down the line, they could access your private keys and take all your Bitcoin, and you never even knew until you go to check your little aluminum card wallet, right? And it's gone. And it's empty. So trusting companies like that, I don't necessarily recommend. I mean, you want to say that when they're little companies and they're big on the community, that they're really just trying to do the right thing. But, if you're talking large amounts, I don't know. I feel like you're really, really rolling the dice, when you do that. So anyway, another popular option that people go with outside of paper wallets or card, like these aluminum card wallets, which are just glorified paper wallets, really, is actual hardware wallets. Just little USB keys that you can plug into a computer, and then you can kind of sneaker net it, right? They don't connect to anything, which is certainly an advantage, and they will. You can access it, and they'll kind of have its own little software on there that can run on whatever computer you happen to have, and you can use that as your as your Bitcoin wallet, right? It makes for great cold storage. That's kind of the what gets put out there. That's the marketing that gets put out there. So, and I mentioned a couple of them. There's Trezor, there's the Ledger wallet. Which those get interesting because they do like smart card stuff where it can work through NFC, which I haven't used one, but I'm guessing that can connect to like a smartphone, kind of like how like YubiKey, like there's the YubiKey Neo, right, which is great for two-factor authentication, where the YubiKey can, it'll have NFC, so it can actually connect to a smartphone. through NFC, but then also it'll have a USB port so it can connect to a computer and you can use it that way too. YubiKey is something that I really, especially in light of recent events, that really I need to be pushing a little bit harder. That I'll be talking about it in upcoming episodes of Sovereign Tech. But anyway, there's KeepKey. There's a few of these out there. Now, the one thing that I can tell you that I'm actually so hardware wallets, and I have one other option that I'm going to talk about, but it's kind of unique, so I'm going to save that. One of the concerns that I have with hardware wallets isn't even necessarily a technical concern, though there are those, and I'm going to cover them in a second. Okay, but my number one concern is that I'm kind of aware of some of these companies, and they're not doing very well financially, and you can say that there's the incentive for them to look, if they don't make their stuff secure, then, what is the point of their business anyway? I don't know. I worry when companies are really strapped, like I know some of these companies are that make these hardware wallets, like they don't have money. And some of them want money. That's the thing. Like, if it's one thing if, like, say Trezor, well, Trezor's just doing it for the love of community, and they're okay if they they don't need to make millions of dollars or anything. They just want to bring something into the world that they wish existed. And like, if that's how they think, and I don't know that that's how Trezor thinks, but if that's how they think, great, then that's a very different story. But I think a lot of these companies are really trying, and well, actually, I know a couple of them are really trying, to make this a very serious business. And look, they don't have any money. Like they can barely pay their people. They can't do advertising. They can't do shit. And that scares the hell out of me. When they don't have the money to, to fund what they do. So, in my opinion, that's a huge security risk right there. One that honestly, a lot of security professionals don't think about. Okay, I'm kind of in the unique position that that's an area where I often think is, well, anyway. It's important to follow the attitude. I say that all the time. I say don't follow the money, follow the attitude. And some of these guys might have great attitudes, but also some of their attitudes directly correlates to, okay, we need to make money. And if that's their attitude, then I'm scared. Okay, because if you're really, like, being into security, necessarily like to make a ton of money, to make a lot of money, and to create a huge business and all that stuff, I think you run into conflicting interests at certain points. And for example, for a grand example would be Kevin Mitnick with his new company, who he's pretty much now, he's like, oh yeah, no, I'll sell 0 days to governments and to other people. I won't just like release it out into the wild. And well, what good could come of that? Oh, great, he makes a few bucks. And I'm not saying he's necessarily being unethical. Well, I think selling to governments is kind of unethical, but that creates all kinds of problems, and that's where even the greatest of hackers can really fall apart, in my opinion. And I think that's ugly business. And so I worry when someone wants to be able to keep the lights on. What part of their ethics and security are they willing to bend? So that's a very serious concern of mine. As far as that goes. Another major concern, and this is a little more of a technical one, and that is, but a lot of this can often come down to, again, do they make enough money? Can they hire the right people? What's the quality of the designers and the engineers and the programmers and all that, right? You could end up with, so the hardware wallets on their own, this isn't a software-based thing where like you could really check it, say if it's open source software. The entire Bitcoin, wallet ecosystem, and the Bitcoin ecosystem in general really relies upon random number generators. Of course, all cryptography relies on this. All security relies on this. Okay, and those random number generators, which is what's going to generate your keys, okay, the thing is that it's very tough to really trust a hardware wallet's implementation of a random number generator. And what could happen in the future is that, what might be happening is you're actually getting pseudo-randomness, because you can't really test it yourself, and in the future, like some kind of very dedicated attacker could really, spoof your keys. So that's a major problem with hardware wallets. That's a big area of lack of trust. And then of course, the other thing with here's a very simple one for you. I mean, like we said, there's money issues. Could the production process of the hardware wallet, could you end, could there be, could the NSA, CIA, whoever, invade the production process, like exploit the production process, like do whatever they do, like they did with kind of the Gemalto SIM cards, right? Like the production process is very scary. The shipping process, and we know this. We've talked about this on Sovereign Tech in the past, where I think it was in the Snowden documents, where the NSA was absolutely intercepting packages and putting various exploits, hardware or software, on devices, before it got to the recipient. So you've got that issue as well. Like, could there be some kind of tampering that's going on? Like, again, either in production or in shipping. So hardware wallets are concerning, in and of themselves. Just from some of those, I mean, the big one is kind of the random number generator. If if we want to talk about implementation itself, among other, problems there could be in implementation. But then, the shipping, the production, and just, again, compromising humans, in their need for money. Yeah, I mean, it's a real roll of the dice. It's a real, roll of the dice. It's a real risk. I think you're really playing with fire when you go for these hardware wallets. Unless it's from like you've got to really trust the person that's doing it. I mean, you got to really fucking trust them. And there's, I can think of processes where, like, you could feel a little more comfortable about it, like where servers could get, effectively melted and lit on fire after a production run or something. I mean, like, there's all kinds of, really drastic steps that could be taken that, might engender a little more trust. But boy, am I not comfortable with that. Now, what I am comfortable with, as far as, now I'll tell you what I think the best wallets are, and maybe some hardware solutions that could be, taken as legitimate. One of them being, and here's kind of the odd thing, because I don't think these are even sold anymore. And that is Pi Wallet. And I just went earlier today. I just went to the website to see if these were still being sold, and like the store is down. So, but you could create this on your own. What Pi Wallet was, and it was pi-wallet.com. Okay, what Pi Wallet was, all it was a Raspberry Pi. Thus the name Pi. It was a Raspberry Pi, and on that Raspberry Pi, it was just, it was pretty much just running running Armory. The Armory Bitcoin wallet. Okay, which, I'll let the cat out of the bag. That is the wallet that I recommend, full stop. Like, just unquestionably, the Armory wallet is top of the line. It is as good as it gets. It gets plenty of funding. There is, to the best of my knowledge, they don't have concerns as far as money. And like, really, the Bitcoin community, I mean, even if they were, I'm pretty sure the Bitcoin community would step up and be donating pretty hardcore to Armory if they were running into some kind of issues, because, it's so used by so many people. It is their go-to, cold storage. I mean, and it's solid as a fucking rock as far as Bitcoin wallets go. I mean, it's been the name for years. It's been the name, to really run with. So, Pi Wallet is, again, you could do this on your own, and this is really getting to one of the solutions for hardware wallets, where you could just have a Raspberry Pi, and you could run a slightly more traditional OS if you wanted onto it, but then you're putting on Armory, obviously running some kind of Linux or BSD or something, like free BSD on a Pi is a great idea. And then you're running Armory, and then that machine, all that does is, act as a Bitcoin wallet. I mean, and come on, these things cost, $35 for a full kit, $50. There's really no good reason not to do that, or why that's not viable for a lot of other people. So you have, that's one hardware wallet option, is to use a Raspberry Pi. You don't have to do Pi Wallet. Like I said, you can just fucking do it yourself. It's really not that bad. Or you could, maybe buy, I mean, and this is an expensive route, but if you wanted maybe the most secure implementation that you could really do is buy like a LibreBoot X200 computer, which I keep a link in the show notes for those computers. Like they're out of Britain. The Ministry of Freedom sells them. Um, they are where the BIOS is totally open source. Like these these computers, they're older computers from like 2009, 2011 something, or 2009 really. I think there's the T400 and the X200. But they are, completely reverse engineered. You can't get computers like this anymore. You buy one of those. They usually come with Triskel on them, which is a completely open source version of Ubuntu, or like a more, shall I say, a free software foundation verified version of Ubuntu. How about that? and uh, and run Armory on that, and away you go. And then you have it all in one, and maybe that would just be your singular Bitcoin wallet, and you just encrypt the shit out of it. Right from boot up of the laptop. So and the X200 is a very small computer. That could be an interesting option for you. So that's one. Of course, that'll cost you. Those cost anywhere from $400 to $1,000. Depending on what kind of setup you want for it. The other option would be, and that's a great option too. Actually, like having that separate computer in X200. Like if you wanted to get on with Zcash, you can really load out. Either a LibreBoot T400 or a LibreBoot X200 with with the Zcash wallet, and it could handle it because you can put more than 4 gig of RAM in them, and then you could have your Bitcoin wallet as well, and that could be a really nice solution for that. If you want to be on board with Zcash right now. The other one, and this is one that has a few different ideas that you could do, is if you just take an older smartphone of yours, okay, and if you use that older smartphone as like cut out all the hardware radios on it, like make it a completely quiet device, install Mycelium on it, sideload Mycelium onto it, okay, the Mycelium wallet, so you'd be using an Android device. And then just use that almost like a paper wallet or like one of those card wallets where you completely communicate with that wallet via QR code. Okay, and you pull from it, and you can even reload because it has this full-on wallet on it. But you want to kill everything. You don't want Wi-Fi on it. You don't want anything on it. Okay, that's kind of my favored way to go. And if you can, put oh shit, it's not. That's terrible. I can't think of the name of it. It's not CyanogenMod. Oh, it's Lineage. Yes, Lineage OS. It took me a second to think of it because CyanogenMod is now Lineage OS. So you want to put, if you can, you want a device that you can put Lineage OS on. All right, that way you're a little more open source. Or even Replicant, I think, is the totally open source. And in fact, with Replicant, like Wi-Fi drivers, I don't even think they work. Because no Wi-Fi driver is open source. So if you can run Replicant or Lineage OS on an old, usually this has to be a Nexus device to be able to run Replicant. But get an old Nexus 4 or something. You probably get one for a song. Put Replicant on there. Sideload Mycelium. Okay, or whatever Bitcoin wallet that you can. It doesn't have to be Mycelium. I don't think Mycelium requires GApps permissions because you're not going to have the Google Play Store on there. You don't want that. No Google. And put that on there, and then, like I said, just use it as like cold storage and just kind of go back and forth with it via QR code. Okay, so that's really kind of the direction I'd go with that. And and there's some other options with that. If you really need to connect it, you could do it through USB, to be able to kind of pull that off if you had to update things or whatever. So those are kind of the hardware wallet implementations that I would run with. Those are the ones that I trust. I don't trust. I really not 100%. I don't. It's better than some. But really, like if somebody said to me, okay, we want to set up a really secure hardware wallet, all right, I would set up, and I would lock down Armory. I would just, download Armory, lock it down, with whatever systems you can, whatever two-factor systems you can, if you use the YubiKey, whatever, make that happen, and then that's the end of it. If you really wanted to do hardware, I would not get Trezor. I mean, they're better. Is Trezor better than, say, CryptoKit, or better than like a blockchain.info wallet or something like that? Sure. Sure, maybe. I mean, depending on how you look at it, yeah, it could be better than that. But if you're willing to go so far as to have a hardware wallet as cold storage, and to hold lots of money, yeah, I would go the Armory route. Or if you wanted to really do hardware, I would do what I described, where you're either buying an X200, specifically to be a wallet computer, or you're doing a Raspberry Pi implementation with Armory on it, or you're doing the kind of the side loaded radio silent, Android device. Those are the options that I would run with. So anyway, let's get on to another. I hope that answers the whole hardware Bitcoin wallet thing. I hope I broke that down, the potential problems, which there are plenty of them. Not to say there aren't problems with software wallets too. Certainly there is, and like cloud-based wallets and all this stuff. There's plenty of problems to go around. It all comes down to personal taste and what you want to handle, what you're using it for. I mean, really, a lot of these concerns only become concerns if you're talking about using Bitcoin in exceptionally large amounts. That's. I mean, you want to take security seriously at all times, but when you want to get really hardcore about it, it's really when when it comes down to again, to these large amounts. I know some people talk about potentially storing stuff like on CDs and DVDs. Oh, don't do that. Oh, don't do that. CDs and DVDs have very, very, very low shelf lives. It's burnable ones anyway. Like pressed ones can last 10, 20 years, maybe. Tops would be 20 years. Usually it's more 5 to 10. But yeah, don't do that. If you wanted to do MDisk, MDisk might be something to consider. So MDisk is something literally, it's a disc, it's a DVD or a Blu-ray, okay, that is, and you need to have a special drive that can write to MDisks, but it can be read by any DVD drive, okay, so you only need the special technology one way, and that's to do the writing. But you can get MDisk writers, I mean, really cheap. In fact, a Sovereign Tech listener actually, purchased one through my wish list at wishlist.zog.ninja for me, and I store all the episodes of Sovereign Tech on MDisks, and MDisks can last thousands of years. It's literally written in stone. So, if you wanted to store them on MDisk, that's an interesting thing, but well, anyway, I'm just putting that out there. But don't go with that optical storage. Otherwise, outside of MDisk, I just don't recommend it. Okay, yeah. So like I said, hopefully we covered that to satisfaction, and let's get into another question here. Let's get into a little history. And this is in reference to actually last week's Q&A, which I got a ton of questions about last week's Q&A. I'm not going to get to all of them in this one. I had people asking me, what's this about the CIA and, creating LSD and all this different stuff. I will be getting into, and other people had comments about drugs in general that I thought were really insightful, and the, expanding of consciousness and all this, and I will save that maybe next week's Q&A. I will do those, or maybe even I'll do a special about it, but I won't be getting to those in this one. But this comment / question is related to something I described. It was last week. It was something I briefly talked about when I was talking about kind of my experiences on Free Talk Live. Because I brought up about, how I would mention smallpox blankets to people that say, oh, yay, Western civilization, how advanced we are. And smallpox blankets in the idea of they were used against Native Americans, to wipe out the population. So I'm going to, listen to last week's episode. You'll understand last week's Q&A if you haven't already. You'll understand the context a little bit better on this one. But I'll read the comment / question. And it's actually from Jim Jesus. Of course, one of the freedom fiends, which worms, baby. And here, I'll read it. So, hey, Brian, great show. I do have one concern that I think I need to issue a caveat before I raise it. I do know what the European settlers and the U.S. government did to the natives, Native Americans being, could only be described as intentional genocide, and it's inexcusable and indefensible. That said, I recall reading that the smallpox blanket story is mostly a myth. The argument went along the lines that it would require that the settlers would have had secret knowledge about the germ theory long before it was formally discovered. That the most likely reason this happened was unintentional transmission. It's one of the reasons it's advised that we don't try to make contact with uncontacted peoples today. That just something as benign as a common flu or cold could wipe them out because they don't have immunities to combat them. I could be totally wrong about this and would love to hear you retort these claims. I thought this was true until I dated a Native American girl who told me that this was just a myth. I have no dog in this fight, and I think you might know something I don't. If you do, I'd love to hear it. Keep up the good work, and per usual, don't mind if you mention me as the commenter worm. So I mentioned the name just because, Jim said he didn't mind, if I mentioned it. So, okay, I'm aware, and this is, we're kind of not walking on eggshells, but we want to tread carefully, on some of this, because it's not that. So Native Americans getting smallpox happened, okay, like this was a thing, and in fact, honestly, it was a thing before. Before the pilgrims even settled here. Okay, this is a thing, from Columbus onward. In fact, I mean, it's really, smallpox itself, and again, this is before any recorded quote-unquote blanket incidents, where the theory goes is that they would, that perhaps the British government or even the American government, some people say Andrew Jackson did this, whatever, knew that these blankets were infected with smallpox, and that they would, they would give the Indians these I shouldn't say Indians. They would give the Native Americans these blankets, and and then that would be a way of wiping them out. Now, smallpox infected the Native American, tribes, nations. Again, long before anything like that would have been done. From the first time that the white boys, shall we say, or the Europeans anyway, that the Europeans landed, on American soil. In fact, prior, just 2 years before, the Pilgrims, kind of started their whole thing in New England. Really, as far as people know, the smallpox wiped out 96% of the Native Americans in Massachusetts alone. So this is before even the Pilgrims were here. So keep that in mind. Now, where it becomes so, yes, smallpox absolutely was a thing long before there was this rumor or potential rumor or idea that blankets could get used to kind of whittle down the population of Native Americans. Okay, so the areas where it becomes myth, or it was done so many times, and it was trying to be how to lay this out. There are a multitude of diaries from military personnel that in multiple cases over a time span of 50, 60, 70 years that talk about different incidents of, kind of this idea of handing out blankets infected with smallpox to whittle down the population of Native Americans. Okay, now here's the thing, is that some of them, yes, the evidence is scant, and so they are likely myth. Okay, it is also, again, it is also very true that really, smallpox, blankets or not, is very much what brought down so much of the Native American population. For example, okay, in Europe at the time, we're talking 18th century, okay, maybe early or later 17th century, but anyway, at that time. Okay, but really within that whole time that we started, that Europeans started settling, okay, America, and started coming over to America. So that that's a little more than just the 17th and 18th century. So you can say over those hundreds of years, Europe was looking at a population of maybe, I don't know, how many million? Like 70 million, maybe? Would that be about? And depending upon which estimates you go by as far as what the Native American population looked like, at least before the smallpox plague. Again, not blankets or not, okay, just the natural spread of it, going west, whatever, is anywhere between 20 to 100 million. Okay, now there's arguments that get made within that itself, and again, I'm going to talk more about these diary entries, that talk about using smallpox blankets. Okay, so the argument goes that, let's say, even if it was conservative, if you were with the conservative 20 million estimate, not even the 100 million estimate, which might be more accurate, of the amount of Native Americans in America when the colony, when people started coming to North America, we should say, from Europe. Obviously, the entire European population wasn't coming here. It wasn't all 70 million people. So, you had a very small amount. It wasn't even 1 million people. How could, the argument kind of goes like this, right? How could, because usually it's, the white man, wiped out the Native Americans. The argument goes with that some kind of, I guess you could say, European apologists or colonial apologists will say, how could we have wiped out how could that many white people or colonials, how could they have wiped out that many that many Native Americans, because they outnumbered us 1,000 to 1, when they were here. How is that possible? Well, okay, so this is that argument falls pretty flat. All right. I mean, it's true that it's probably true, I should say, that yes, smallpox, again, blankets, with blankets or without blankets, is what really could defeated the Native Americans, as far as them being kind of a major force on the American continent, again, intentional or otherwise. But let's look at Cortez, okay, going after the Aztecs, within that time frame. Now, Cortez had an exceptionally small, force of people. I mean, literally, not even just a few thousand, frankly. That was the size of Cortez's, little army. Okay? That army was taking on a civilization, that being the Aztecs, in the millions. How? Even with guns, compared to bows and arrows and spears and whatever other, weapons, other kind of weaponry that the Aztecs had. How, with that kind of numbers that the Aztecs clearly had, how was Cortez able to defeat them so handily? Well, it's a very simple answer. And it's not, now I'm not praising the Aztecs. I'm not necessarily praising the culture of the Native Americans or whatever. This isn't some kind of apology on my part. Okay, but here's the simple fact, is that Cortez, the Europeans, the conquistadors, were mentally capable of killing at that scale. That's it. That's how they won. In fact, really, there's no other answer. It wasn't disease for the Aztecs, not at all. You really don't have much a record of that. Okay, what happened is just that Cortez and his men, the small number of them, yes, they had an advanced technology, but psychologically, they were so sick, frankly, that they were able to kill that many people. Because I would argue that humans really aren't meant to do that, and that there is a natural aversion to killing on that scale. But they lost it because of, whatever wonders of Western civilization allowed them to kill so many people at once, mentally. So you can look at the case of, Cortez and the Aztecs, and then compare it to, the Native Americans and the North American Europeans, coming over. Okay, so numbers weren't on their side. That doesn't mean that, it wasn't European guns that still did a lot of the slaughtering, okay, of Native Americans at a level, kind of like Jim Jesus said, where it was absolutely intentional genocide. Because, again, for whatever reason, Western civilization seems to think it's okay to, to kill on such a massive scale. Fuck Western civilization. That's just stallion breaking in there. Okay, now, as far as the blankets go, okay, yes, there are some cases where it would appear to be, no, that didn't really happen, or there's not enough evidence, like say that Andrew Jackson did, or that this person did, and they passed around these smallpox blankets. But there's some where it seems to be plenty of evidence that it happened, and I'm going to address the argument of germ theory. Like that they somehow they must have known germ theory or understood germ theory, and I will address that here in just a second, because that also has a very simple kind of explanation. So first things first to understand is that this is biological warfare. The idea of taking smallpox infested blankets and giving them to another population in the hopes of dwindling that population and killing them off. This is an idea that not with smallpox, but with other things, be it Hannibal launching, jars, effectively. I mean, we're talking Greek jars, these big goddamn things, with venomous snakes in them and launching them from his ships, and the snakes would all, attack, the Roman soldiers and whatever. It was a very successful thing. It was one of the ways that, kind of Hannibal ended up fighting a couple wars against Rome, which no one else would ever really be able to do. And there's other cases where diseased bodies would effectively get catapulted into into cities, to effectively wipe out everybody within the city with disease over time. Like say during a siege, you just had to wait for everybody to get sick and die, but just siege the city and they couldn't go anywhere else, and so you had a very contained, simple biological weapon just by using your own dead that were your own diseased dead. And those diseases spread by, ticks, mites, fleas, whatever. So the use of biological warfare in this way wasn't a new idea, and certainly, to say that, the Europeans invading North America didn't understand germ theory, so they couldn't figure this out, is a misnomer, because clearly, even hundreds of years before kind of the first written it, and then understand this idea of the smallpox blanket, the first recorded incidents would be during the French and Indian Wars, which would have been, we're talking mid 18th to late 18th century, right? Like 1760s, something like this. Okay. But even hundreds of years before that, you have a very clear understanding that, oh yeah, if we send disease, if we launched diseased things, or people per se, into cities, it will infect the rest of the city. Like there was that understanding. Or they would use rats to spread bubonic plague, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of how that whole plague, became a thing, is that it was weaponized. So there was an understanding of that. Now, you can say, you could be kind of on a finer point and say, well, but they wouldn't know that an inanimate object, like, okay, maybe they could understand that a living thing or a once living thing could spread a disease, but they wouldn't know perhaps that just like an inanimate object could carry a disease. Well, here's the thing, is that, speaking of like during the Black Plague, okay, which ended the lives of, 60% of the European, depending on your metrics, population, which again, smallpox wiped out, 90%, depending on what geographic area you're talking about with the Native Americans. But, talking about the Black Plague, one population of people, one culture, I guess you could say, but really it's a culture and an ethnicity, that survived largely the Black Plague were the Jews. And in fact, that's part of the reason that's part of that long history of the Jews getting blamed for things is, oh, well, the Jews aren't getting sick during the Black Plague. They must be causing it. And this was a way of thinking for a lot of people. Now, why did the Jews survive this sort of thing? Why? Ritualistic hand washing? So much of Levitical law is all about just cleaning the shit out of things, purifying things through fire. So, the Black Plague couldn't really spread to them because they wiped it out just with their religious practices. But did the Jews have an understanding of germ theory? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But that doesn't mean that they didn't have, that somehow, and this gets into, kind of wild speculation where, okay, well, how did the Jews exactly figure out, like how to protect from germs and other things? Because it seems like Levitical law and kashrut law, is somehow, almost, of course I'm an atheist, but almost divinely set to protect them protect them from disease and all these different things, right? How did they figure out that knowledge? Well, I mean, if you're just to take the most base atheist answer, it is that just they saw, it was cause and effect. They saw, or it was just effect. They saw the effect. They were so hyper aware of the effects that even though they didn't know the exact scientific cause, they knew enough to say, okay, but when we do this, when we mess with a dead body, this disease happens. So we're not gonna mess with dead bodies. Or when we have, say, like foreign people come into the land, if they don't go through certain rituals, we can't really trust that they're not bringing some kind of disease with them or something like this. Again, that's not some kind of argument against foreigners, coming into a country or anything. It's really not. But point being is that, they were acutely aware of effects, and they had just hints of the cause. Okay, but yeah, no, I don't think the Jews had any idea about what germ theory was. And the Jews even borrowed half their shit from Zoroastrianism, which is even older. And I don't think they knew anything about germ theory. So I think that argument, and Jim Jesus was just making me aware of it. He wasn't espousing it, and I appreciate that. Okay, but I think that argument doesn't really, hold up very well when you consider that there's plenty of incidents, in history where obviously people, knew how to take actions against germs, but had no idea about germ theory. And I mean, and I'm just giving a couple of examples here. So anyway, I want to get to the example, the most popular example that doesn't appear to be myth. And maybe I'm open to being wrong, but I've yet to see this one get debunked. Some of them I've seen get debunked. This is one that hasn't. Sir Geoffrey Amherst. He was the commander of the British forces in North America. And he specifically said in his journals that he was formulating a plan to reduce, and that's his exact words, reduce the size of the Native American tribes. The ones that were hostile to the British Crown anyway. So anyway, spring 1763, there was an outbreak of smallpox in Fort Pitt. Now, this wasn't against the Native Americans. This was just happening, amongst the English, amongst the British. And so at Fort Pitt, now, so this is interesting. Okay, this gets into an idea called fomite, which is the concept that they were developing at the time that an inanimate object like a blanket could actually transmit bacteria, or could transmit, a disease or, an infectious agent anyway. And, so blankets, handkerchiefs, all this stuff, usually what would happen is, and this is the part that we do know, so while yes, they might not have understood germ theory, they did have an understanding that inanimate objects could spread disease, because what they would do, with fomite is that they usually, they would burn them. Okay, they would burn the handkerchiefs, they would burn the blankets of the people that, say, particularly in this case at Fort Pitt, that had smallpox, because they knew that was the only way really to get rid of it. Of course, where did they learn about that from? Hey, maybe they picked it up from the Jews, because that's what the Jews would have done. All right. So, but instead, what Sir Geoffrey Amherst did at Fort Pitt, he said, no, don't burn them, save them. Set them aside. All the handkerchiefs, all these different things. So June 24th, 1763, Amherst, one of his guys, a Captain Ecuyer, he did exactly what Sir Amherst wanted him to do. He gave it to the local population, of Native Americans, and I mean, and it's crazy because even, Captain Ecuyer, he came out and says, I hope it'll have the desired effect. I mean, that's the thing, is there's these journals that, back and separate journals going back and forth saying that, well, not just journals, but letters, saying that, oh yeah, we're going to do this. Now, again, where the myth comes in, I mean, and that's just one example, where they would do that. Okay. Where the myth comes in is that that's what wiped out, that was the singular agent, say, that it was purposeful, that the Europeans did it, that it was intentional, on their part, to really, and that's what caused smallpox to wipe out so much of the Native American population. Okay. That's the myth. That's where the problem comes in, is that no, okay, it wasn't the blankets that wiped out the Native Americans from smallpox. It was just smallpox itself spreading the way that it does. However, that doesn't change the fact that people like, Sir Jeffrey Amherst and his underlings, that they were spreading blankets, and that one would assume it had the effect, and that there were reports of it happening. And there's other cases too where they talked about it, when you get more into the 1800s, and then once you get into the into the 1800s, you're talking about the works of Louis Pasteur, who would end up kind of getting into germ theory and things like this, or who would start. Well, that's where the word pasteurized comes from. So, then you would get into more of the scientific proving of the matter. But I would more argue that the use of this form of biological warfare with smallpox itself may have led to a lot of and this is disgusting and unfortunate, okay, but that would lead to a lot of the medical understanding that would later be developed in the Americas and even in Europe. It's very similar to, in my opinion, it's very similar to how in Nazi Germany, this is not an understatement. Over 50% of our medical knowledge, or not 50%, but so much, what I meant to say, not 50%, but we're probably 50 years advanced in medical knowledge today because of the horrors that Nazi Germany enacted against its own against Germans, against Jews, against everybody that it did, and just didn't have a care for human life. In fact, in the 80s, there was in Colorado, there was that huge summit saying, like, is it ethical for us to use the medical data learned from the Nazis, in our practice, because it's just so terrible how it was all discovered? So it's a fact that yes, advancements will happen. This is not how they have to happen, but it is how they do happen. Often enough, that medical advancements happen because of just terrible experiments being done. And one could argue that the smallpox blankets were a terrible experiment being done on the Native Americans, which could have led to an understanding of germ theory. Okay, so, it could have just been the precursor to getting that understanding. Much like so much of the medical science we have today, its precursor was, frankly, the wiping out of millions of Jews and, other people around the world due to, the Axis powers. So I think it's very similar, but that doesn't change the fact, like, regardless of whether or not, in my opinion, regardless of whether or not smallpox naturally wiped out 90% of, the Native North American population, or whether it was done, if that's what happened, that's what happened, but it doesn't change the fact that we have plenty of historical evidence that, no, the colonials, the European settlers, whatever, the British, whatever terms you want to run with, okay, were absolutely engaging in intentional genocide. Okay, they made, their intentions may not have been the real catalyst of what wiped out so many Native Americans, but that doesn't mean they didn't want it to be. That doesn't mean that they weren't trying. And that, and so in my opinion, yeah, particularly in the case of Amherst, and there's a few others, independent sources, that smallpox blankets was clearly an idea. Fort Pitt wasn't the only one. So yeah. So again, the myth is that there's some cases where it doesn't appear to be true, and that also the myth is that it wasn't just the smallpox. It was really a more natural spread of smallpox that did the bulk of the wiping out. It wasn't the smallpox blankets themselves. So that's maybe that's where the confusion kind of lies with some people. But that's the nuance that's required, when talking about that. So anyway, hopefully I described that. There's so much history there. Like, you kind of got to get into the French Indian Wars and all this. All right, I'm an hour in. I don't know if I want to dive into the next one, but all right, well, let's do it, because it shouldn't take a terrible amount of time. And this has to do, this is another historical one, and it has to do actually with cannibals of all things. So maybe not a funny subject. But anyway, here's the question. Hi, Brian. I have a history question for you. I've always been fascinated by cannibalism. I know, weird. And recently I read a book, Among Cannibals by Carl Lumholtz, the account of a Norwegian explorer's travels in Australia in the 1880s. He lived and traveled with the Aborigines for a period of time and talks about their way of life and cannibalistic practices. In the book, he describes the Aborigines as a fairly carefree people who lived in small family tribes and were essentially hunter-gatherers, but they were very territorial, warlike, and would hunt and kill people from other tribes and often eat them. Also, there are scientists who believe that endocannibalism, the eating of others from your community, usually after death, which also is an ectocannibalism, where it's from the outside, or exocannibalism, maybe it's exocannibalism, where you eat people from outside your tribe, both of which are certainly practiced, may have been a common practice in prehistoric times due to certain genes that we have that protect against diseases caused by eating other people. I wonder what your thoughts are on the practice of cannibalism. I get the idea that you hold a belief that prehistoric peoples lived fairly peaceful lives, yet when modern humans, quote-unquote modern humans, have come across people living as hunter-gatherers, they're sometimes very hostile and, dare I say, savage. Would love to hear your opinion on this sometime. Okay, so yeah, now there is, DNA, evidence. There is evidence, bottom line. There is evidence that, yes, humans, even, some of the oldest forms of Homo sapiens, we're talking 600,000 years ago, that they engaged in cannibalism. It's true, okay? And is there any, when you're that close kind of to more the I guess the, humanity not breaking away from, how to put this, from their instincts, what makes a human human, in my opinion? Not just saying Homo sapien, what makes a human being human? Or a person, because it could be something other than a human, maybe a dolphin or an elephant, who knows? What makes a human human, in my opinion, is their ability to act outside of instinct. Now, acting within instinct, I'm not really sure where there would be this hard line that you couldn't eat other humans if you had to, if you had to survive. So, I don't debate that there's evidence, because it's, as our understanding of science goes, it's pretty hard evidence that, yeah, humans have eaten other humans, over time. Now, the question, the quote-unquote term modern humans, okay, this is where, I would kind of shake things up a bit. So there is a point, and I talk about this often because I think it is such a seminal moment. Like what 9/11 is to America, this event is to the human species, okay, to Homo sapiens. And that event, 70,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano. I've talked about it plenty of times. The theory goes is that when the Toba supervolcano went off, 70,000 years ago, that it wiped out the human population to anywhere between 1,500 to 10,000. Anywhere in that estimate. And regardless, in my opinion, of where you sit within that estimate, here's kind of my simple answer to this, but I'll expound a bit more. Regardless where you sit within that estimate, if humans engaged in cannibalism, certainly of like the living, to say nothing of the dead, if humans engaged in cannibalism of the living, let's say particularly, then there's no way we'd be here, because they would have eaten each other off. Not off. Right? There wouldn't be any humans left. And I imagine at the time that finding, now here's kind of the flip side of that. I imagine at the time there was there would have been a food shortage, because obviously it wasn't just humans affected by the Toba supervolcano. So were the humans eating their dead? Maybe, but it would only be their dead. It's not like they would go around killing other humans to be able to eat, or I really don't think that could have, just by the fact that we're here, that could not have happened. So when you're talking about cannibalism, it becomes like a very, you got to be really careful about the conversation. Are we talking about killing people to eat them, or are we talking about eating the dead that have already died for other reasons? Okay, because when it comes down to eating the dead who have died for other reasons, I could see that practice being very widespread, not just among Homo sapiens. Neanderthals would have, there's evidence that they did that too. And that's the big question, right? Is that, were they eating just people that died off for very natural reasons? And that doesn't really, if that's the reason why they did it, that honestly doesn't affect, I have another point to make, but that honestly doesn't affect my concepts of empathy, or that, and it doesn't change that humans lived a very peaceful life. Okay, because, it would, well, again, if you're just waiting for, if you're only eating them after they die, you're not killing the humans, so you were still living a very peaceful life, right? So even if they, again, it depends on how we define cannibalism. Are you eating them after they're dead, or are you killing them to eat them? If it's just eating them after they're dead, then yes, my theory still holds true that yes, humans lived very, very peaceful lives. Now, let's expound on this a little bit, okay? There is the theory that the reason, we were just talking about during, the smallpox blanket conversation, we were talking about the Jews, okay, and how they seem to have an understanding to some degree of germ theory and some other things, or at least they had very, very advanced health codes that they really shouldn't have had. Okay, but how did they develop these? What was the natural process they went through? Did God actually give them to them? No, of course, I'm an atheist, I don't think so. So I think they observed things that they kind of figured out what was round about the cause, even if they didn't know the specifics. So what could have happened is that the Jews, or the Zoroastrians, who, maybe they originated this, the Levitical health code, before the Jews even did, and that gets into a whole other historical conversation. What exactly did Abraham know that he taught the rest of the Hebrews? I mean, that's a whole other thing. So what may have happened is that, either the Jews or Zoroastrians, whatever, ancient peoples saw that eating certain types of bodies with certain signs on them, maybe hair loss, other things, white blotches, whatever the case, that would show off some kind of disease in a person, they would see that other people would get the disease after they ate that person. And this is going to go a little further. Okay, so they, the idea of eating the dead became anathema because they equated that with disease. Now, here's the interesting thing, is that perhaps, and this is a theory, okay, this is actually kind of a popular theory, that perhaps the reason that there is, an abolition of eating pork, a prohibition against eating pork in Judaism, is because pig, supposedly, pork tastes a lot like human flesh. And so they equated it with the disease and with the, maybe there was some kind of human dignity involved, like the idea of burying the dead became a thing when civilization came around. Maybe there was this, equating of, okay, that's like eating a human being. We don't allow for that. That's ixnay on the hombre these days, boys. We're not going to do that at all. And so that's where the prohibition on eating pork came from, is because it reminded these ancient peoples of cannibalism, which they now knew, or which they now thought, shall we say, was a bad idea. So, yeah, I mean, again, I really can't think of the reason why eating the dead would be seen as some kind of terrible thing. Especially, I mean, kind of the person's dead, and it. Now, the idea of So I can accept that might have been a popular thing, to eat the dead. Now, the idea of killing people and eating them, this is what usually people think about with cannibalism, right? They start thinking of Hannibal Lecter and all this stuff, where he would kill people to eat them. That practice, I think, is not so widespread, and I think that is something that started with more modern humans. And probably for, ironically, religious reasons. The same reason that cannibalism of perhaps even the dead could have gone away is the same reason that cannibalism of the living could have become a thing. Because, you end up with, in fact, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this. It's actually a pretty good movie. It's a weird-ass movie, but it's pretty good. And it came out in '99. It's Ravenous. This Guy Pearce is in it. I mean, David Arquette, a whole bunch of different actors, that do a hell of a job. And in this movie, it takes place during the Spanish-American War, or I'm sorry, the Mexican American War, Spanish American Wars after that, Rough Riders, woo. uh, this takes place during the Mexican American War, and in it you have this captain that like he figures out somehow that eating other people actually makes you like really powerful, gives you these regenerative abilities, even like maybe makes you younger or something. I haven't seen the movie in a while, but that's kind of the gist. And while that's just a movie, I could see where an ancient religion of some kind could get started that would believe in that. That maybe like eating or drinking the blood of your enemies or eating the flesh of your enemies or something like this, could become a faith. I mean, honestly, it's still a faith today. Not of your enemies, but look at the Catholics. They literally eat their God. I mean, how abominable is that, right? but I mean, they eat their God, in hopes of having salvation and all this stuff, right? And getting some kind of grand power. So it's not so crazy because there's a billion people on the planet Earth right now that practice or that think they practice this. That they literally, because they believe in what is it, the transmutation, that, the blood, even though it's just grape juice that they're pouring, or the wine or whatever, actually becomes the blood of Christ, that little wafer actually becomes the flesh of Christ when it enters your throat. They really believe this. Or they're supposed to. So, cannibalism still happens today, and it's very popular. All right. It's just they think they're eating Jesus Christ instead of other people. And, and honestly, actually, I mean, in their mind, Jesus Christ is very much alive. He is risen, right? So cannibalism, not so crazy an idea. Definitely a religious construct. Okay. Now, the idea of eating the dead, not the living, okay, that's the idea of eating the dead may not be a religious construct. I can see a lot of reasons why that would develop, all right, genetic or otherwise. But the eating of the living or of killing the living to eat them, whatever. I mean, that's still very, very popular today, and most people just don't even think about it. Like how twisted is that? That people think they're actually eating Jesus Christ. Now, understand, Protestantism doesn't believe in the transmutation. They just think that they're, they know they're just eating a cracker. They know they're just eating, or drinking grape juice or something, and it's just supposed to be symbolic and representative. They're not literally doing it. And I'm not really necessarily judging either one as being better because, well, again, I'm an atheist. But, yeah. so, yeah, bottom line, and, I can definitely see that, yeah, eating of the dead could have been a popular thing amongst humans, even in a very peaceful human society, because what's not peaceful, there, right? It could be disturbing, maybe like, and maybe some kind of ideas could develop around that. Understand, because I also think that, ancient humans, we're talking Paleolithic humans, that Paleolithic humans, like, they didn't have a grand understanding of things, like that humanity might have evolved. Like the idea is that, like say a woman, and please, I don't mean this in any like, sexual slander or slur, but like a woman would want semen from everybody in the tribe, right? That's kind of how the theory goes, and every woman would want that. It's not just one, right? Because they figured that like the theory goes, and you still see this in modern hunter-gatherers. The theory goes is that you would, you're getting all the power of the tribe. All right. So could that pass on to, now you're not going to kill anybody in the tribe because again, a lot of that's all celebration of life. You're not going to kill anybody in the tribe, but if somebody died, is eating their flesh, is that like making them a part of you or something? Like it's not a hard leap for people to kind of think that way. And you could say that that's becoming a religion. Well, maybe, but again, it's a lot different than, killing somebody to eat them. And there have been secret societies that do that. There's secret societies still today that do this, where like it's part of their, what is it, the leopard men that like in Africa or something, or I think that's it. Maybe in, well, anyway, their theory is, and there's others that do this, their theory is that, yeah, they go out, they kill a person and then they eat them, they pass the flesh around. Yeah. So, nothing. I don't necessarily see the harm in, other than the potential of disease and all that, but clearly it seems like ancient humans figured that one out too. That of eating the dead, but then, killing somebody to eat them, that's a whole other ball game. And as far as like it being seen in modern hunter gatherers, I can only imagine that's some kind of like outcropping of animism. But I don't think like humans in their quote unquote natural zero state, blank slate, are not religious. I mean, they're just not. Like they don't normally develop religion. Something kind of brings that on, and that's a whole other conversation to have. Is it psilocybin mushrooms? What brings on religion for humans? That's a whole other conversation. So anyway, I hope that answers that. I mean, that's kind of my thoughts on it. I don't see like if it's just eating people after they naturally die, or whatever happens to them that they die. Like I don't see where that doesn't really stand in any way. It doesn't debunk or stand in contrast with the theory that humans, in a state of nature, are very peaceful creatures. Really doesn't. But then if we're talking about like Hannibal Lecter style cannibalism, well that I think doesn't fit the mold. That's just a fucked up human being. That's fucked up human beings, that kill to eat another human, because empathy just wouldn't allow for that to happen. And if that was how humans were meant to be, like I said, we never would have survived till now. After the Toba supervolcano, just wouldn't have happened if that was what humans thought was order of the day. So there you go. Okay, now let's get into real quick, because I'm already running long here. I want to get into my my album picks for the week, and these are, you're probably going to be shocked, okay? But these are they are so good, and you really wouldn't expect it, but they are. So the two albums I'm going to give you, they're actually both by the same guy. Obviously, he has a band behind him, but Michael Bolton. I know you didn't see it coming, but you got to listen to me, okay? These are serious hard rock, near metal albums, okay, by Michael Bolton. This is not the pop stuff. Not that I mind that either. Like I'm all about it. Soul Provider, please. That shit's sexy as hell, okay? But now understand that Michael Bolton had two albums in the 70s. Don't bother with those. But he had a self-titled album called Michael Bolton. Well, actually, his first album was Michael Bulletin, which is, I guess, his real name. But his first album from '83, Michael Bolton, and then his 1985 sophomore album, Everybody's Crazy. Both of these albums are hard rock albums. They are not pop. They are not a bunch of love songs. In fact, the song, the title track off of 85's Everybody's Crazy is badass, and it's like the only song he'll ever really include from those albums and from that era. But man, I mean, these are just great rockin' albums. I mean, you don't necessarily want to call them metal, but understand this, that his guitarist at the time in 83 and 85, his guitarist was Bruce Kulick. Now, if you don't know who Bruce Kulick is, he's one of the greatest guitarists of all time. Bruce Kulick is the guy that ended up, so with Kiss, okay, with my personal favorite band, Kiss, when Kiss, after Ace Frehley and Peter Criss left, of course, Eric Carr filled in for Peter Criss, late great Eric Carr. And then for Ace, when Ace finally left after Creatures of the Night, even though he really wasn't there for Creatures of the Night, you ended up with Vinnie Vincent, who only did one album and then disappeared. And after Vinnie Vincent left, well, then they got Mark St. John for Animalize, but then Mark St. John came down with a condition where he couldn't play with his hands, and I think he's dead now too. Animalize, boy, great album. But anyway, after Animalize, when you ended up in 85 and 86 with Asylum, which is shy of my favorite Kiss album, maybe my favorite Kiss album, they brought on Bruce Kulick. And they kept Bruce Kulick from then up all the way until the reunion tour, that they did with Psycho Circus in, 96, 97 and all that. So he was Kiss's, main man as far as guitar playing goes. I mean, yeah, I know Paul plays rhythm guitar, obviously, but he was their main man. He was their lead guitarist for 10 years. And during, in my opinion, their best albums, Asylum, Crazy Nights, Let's Put the X in Sex. There's a couple songs off that, even though it's a greatest hits album. But you also get to hear Eric Carr sing Beth in that. And he was there for Hot in the Shade. I love that. Read My Body. What a great song. He was there for, Revenge. He was there for Carnival of Souls. And in fact, Creatures of the Night, which again had very little to do with Ace Frehley, they re-released Creatures of the Night when they had such a solid lineup with it being Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Bruce Kulick, and Eric Carr, they re-released it, and on the new cover, I think they re-released it in '87. With the new cover, they had Bruce Kulick on the cover. Okay, because that's how much they invested in this guy. Because they're like, no, this is the man. This guy's amazing. Because Bruce Kulick is fucking amazing, and he has his own solo albums too. But anyway, my point being is that originally, not a lot of people know this. Michael Bolton was a metal singer. And he had a metal band. He had Bruce Kulick. He had the goods. And in fact, Bruce Kulick even still, I think, contributed somewhat to '87's The Hunger. But The Hunger is when really Michael Bolton started making a name for himself and kind of became, the pop icon that he would end up becoming. And then in '89, of course, he'd have Soul Provider and, '91's Time, Love, and Tenderness. And, the rest is history. But Michael Bolton's first two albums, I know you're thinking I'm nuts. You're thinking Everybody's Crazy, but that's the thing. That's one of the best songs ever written is Everybody's Crazy off the '85 Michael Bolton album, Everybody's Crazy. So '83 Michael Bolton, '85 Everybody's Crazy, both of those albums, especially the '85 Everybody's Crazy, both of those albums are badass. I mean, just great hard rock albums. You have awesome guitar riffs, great guitar solos during it. Michael Bolton's voice is tailor-made for metal. He really, if he held on to it, it was more of a hard rock thing, but he could have easily been up there with Joe Lynn Turner, Rob Halford, in my opinion. He could have been, like, I can only imagine. I love, there was like a couple songs, I guess, that were done. It was called Trinity, where it was Bruce Dickinson, of course, of Iron Maiden, and then you had Jeff Tate of the Great Queensryche, one of my favorite bands, and then you had Rob Halford, and that was the Trinity, because these are like the three operatic, really high-pitched kind of, human sirens, right? You could have had, a quadrinity, if you added in Michael Bolton with that, if he stayed with the whole metal thing. I'm glad as shit that Bruce Kulick ended up going to Kiss, because he made my favorite era of Kiss, from like '86. Well, really, my favorite era is from Lick It Up, or really, I guess, Creatures of the Night, all the way up to Carnival of Souls. Even though I like Psycho Circus, I love all the new albums. But yeah, man, those two Michael Bolton albums, hard fucking rockers. Seriously, you don't even know until you listen to it. Just listen to Everybody's Crazy. If you don't believe me, just listen to that one, and then you can check out the rest of the albums. They're great. So there's my oddball album picks of the week, and that's enough. That's enough Q&A for this week. Got some other episodes coming out this week as well for you. I have the Anarchapulco review show that I'll be releasing, as well as I have another comic books top 8 that'll be coming out in the next couple days here. So, and then got a huge Sovereign Tech, got a Sex and Science Hour coming out, but yeah, definitely the Sovereign Tech's going to be crazy this week. So there you go. Woo! I'll see everybody on the other side of all of this.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.